Hello, 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 and welcome back to Spin Cycle Live. I'm your host, Nathan Hale. Today, we have quite the episode to get into, from the attacks on Iran from the United States to so much more. My gosh, a lot has happened over the weekend, guys, and I have a lot to say about it. But before all that, I hope you're having a great Monday. Today is June 23rd, 2025. And I am so happy to be with you all. If you're not already following me or following the show, make sure you're doing that on X, Rumble, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all the platforms. Go follow me there. You know my handle, @HomoATN, on all those different platforms. You can follow the show at Spin Cycle Live, or I think it's The Spin Cycle on Rumble. But with that, let's get right into our first episode, our first story. Not our first episode, our first story. All right, so this comes from the New York Post. So let me go ahead and pull up my screen here. All right. So I'm saving before you get on me. I'm saving all the Iran conflict stuff to the end because I have a lot to say about all that. So be ready then. All right. So this comes from the New York Post. Home sales sluggish in May as high mortgage rates sideline buyers. U.S. existing home sales unexpectedly increased in May, but the trend remains weak amid high mortgage rates. Home sales climbed 0.8% last month to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 4.3 million units, the National Association of Realtors said on Monday. Economists polled by Reuters have forecast home resales falling to a rate of 3.95 million units. The sales pace was the slowest for the month of May since 2009. Sales fell 0.7% on a year-over-year basis in May. Quote, the relatively subdued sales are largely due to persistent high mortgage rates, said Lawrence Yun, the NAR's chief economist. Quote, if mortgage rates decrease in the second half of the year, expect more sales across the country to increase. The average rate on the popular 30-year fixed-rate mortgage has hovered just around 7% this year. President Trump's aggressive tariffs on imported goods have heightened uncertainty over the economy, which the Federal Reserve has responded to by pausing its interest rate cutting cycle. The central bank last week kept its benchmark overnight interest rate at 4.25 to 4.5%, where it has been since December. Fed Chair Jerome Powell told reporters he expected meaningful inflation ahead due to the import duties. A National Association of Home Buyers survey on Tuesday showed sentiment among single-family home builders plummeted to a 2.5-year low in June. The NAHB reported an increase in the share of builders cutting prices to lure buyers. The forecast a decline in single-family starts this year. Residential investments, which include home building and home sales, contracted slightly in the first quarter after rebounding in 2024 following steep declines in the prior 2 years caused by a surge in mortgage rates. The inventory of existing homes increased 6.2% to 1.54 million units in May. Supply surged 20.3% from a year ago. The median existing home price rose 1.3% from a year earlier to $422,800 in May, an all-time high for the month. At May's sales pace, it would take 4.6 months to exhaust the current inventory of existing homes, up from 3.8 months a year ago. So that's interesting, just for the sole reason that, we've been told that mortgage rates need to be cut, which they absolutely do need to be at some point. Whenever that is, will be up to the Fed. But we need more homes built. I mean, it's just as simple as that. We need more homes built that are geared towards people who have less money. We have this huge housing supply right now in the United States that's made up of all these homes that were built primarily 15 to 30 years ago, I would say, without having the numbers solely in front of me. and not a whole lot. And so all the homes, most of the homes that we have right now that are going on the market are these suburban 3 to 4 bedroom homes, and they've just skyrocketed in price, right? Because there's less supply for them. We've had a lot of people move around, and we're still feeling the pressure of the home market and how people moved from COVID. It's as simple as that. So we don't have enough homes that are geared towards people who are looking for their first home now, right? A starter home back, 30 years ago was a 3 bedroom home, right? But starter home now needs to be like a 2 bedroom or 1 bedroom home, right? We need more homes that are basically large apartments, essentially, where it's perfect for a couple who's just gotten married to go and move into it and live there and build up some equity. And then when they're ready to have kids, then they move to a bigger place, right? But there needs to be that gap between where we're just renting in apartment buildings to actually owning equity. And it's important that people do own equity. So whenever housing comes up, I like to go over to this lovely spreadsheet that a gentleman made called the Trump Tracker. Now, this is linked in the description if you're watching on Rumble or on YouTube. You can go in and look down there and see this all for yourself. But this is updated very frequently. It was updated today, actually, so these numbers are legitimate for June 23rd. And it goes through several factors that are influencing the home buying and selling market right now. So this is the dashboard on the spreadsheet. So it shows the current housing supply, the current affordability index, and how close we are to a housing crash. So in terms of supply, we have a very tight housing supply right now. Affordability is very strained. And in terms of housing crash, we're super far away from a housing crash. Overall housing stability index is nowhere close to affordable. And then it gives some metrics down here as to how they come up with these numbers, right? So these are not arbitrary numbers. I believe the guy who put this together is a real estate expert. I'm not completely sure all his entire background, but I know that these numbers are legit, and they do give a methodology down here as to how they determine these. Now, going over to the actual Trump tracker, we can see a few different things. So I'm going to kind of skip over this first part. Basically, it shows things like build to track housing affordability with unbiased housing affordability with unbiased raw data. So if you want to see the total home increase, regulatory cost cuts, all these different things, they link exactly to that various data points. You can also see bill trackers right here. You can see that all of these bills to help out home buyers have died in Congress, except for a few of these over here. So you can go and look at them, read them all for yourself, and then you can see there's an affordability chart underneath it. So right now, the most affordable region in the United States is the Midwest. The resale home median is about $300,000 versus in the South, it's around $360,000, so a bit more. West is by far the most expensive at $623,000 for the resale home value. So you go and look at this. They also have the different risk factors, but the biggest thing that I want to show is right over here that shows the cost tracking. So like I said, you can click on all of these and links directly to it, but you can see these are some major things that are needed to build new homes in the United States. And right now, about half of them are stable. Concrete is on the rise by a few dollars. Steel has had a massive drop recently. It's gone down about $127 since the start of the Trump administration. But lumber is majorly up. It's up about $80 since the start. You can also see things underneath this like car insurance, home insurance, gasoline prices, boneless chicken, bread, eggs, milk, kilowatts per hour of energy. You can see the prices of all these current is where they are when it started. So eggs and bread are the only two things that are down since the start of the Trump administration. Everything else is either stabilized or gone up. And we can also see over here just some other key housing metrics. So you can see the mortgage rates, all that. So What I'm saying is we've seen a slight dip in key things that matter. So you can click on history here. So we can see over here some of the biggest things that matter. Mortgage rates. Mortgage rates have dropped since January. The average mortgage is down from 7% all the way down to 6.8, so about a 0.2% decrease. Not a whole lot, but it is going down. The federal funds rate has stayed the same. 10-year treasury yields have stayed roughly the same. They've gone down slightly. Core inflation is down slightly. Not a whole lot, but it's not anything to be scoffed at. Median household income has stayed the same. Total housing inventory has gone up just a little bit. New construction has gone up slightly. So you can go and look at the history of all this. It's really interesting, kind of go through and look at stuff and see actual data points instead of what like the media is trying to do. So how does you go and look at this? All that to say, we're not doing enough right now to increase our home market. And my hope is that by the time that I'm out trying to buy a home, and you'll be right there along with me when I'm looking for them, is that the home market will have stabilized and getting a nice house will not cost an arm and a leg to get. Hopefully we build that housing supply. So we'll be sure to keep you updated on all of the housing supply needs as time goes on. All right, next story, moving on. We have a story from the National Institute of Health. This comes from Daily News and World Report. NIH to fund $10 million study in long-term health studies after Ohio train disaster. So if you don't remember, a couple years ago, there was the disaster that happened in East Palestine, Ohio, that had to do with a train derailment. It spewed toxic chemicals all over the place, and there have been a ton of people that have been crying for this data to be analyzed and kept so we can see over time what's actually happening. There have been reports of people having adverse reactions to all this, and there's not really a whole lot they can do right now because they're having a hard time proving that was the actual train derailment that caused their health issues. So this is important to see that they're doing things like this so that if lawsuits can be brought out, they have substantiated data to use in that lawsuit. So the National Institute of Health will fund studies of the long-term health effects of a 2023 Ohio train derailment that released more than 1 million pounds of hazardous chemicals into the soil, air, and water. Residents of East Palestine, Ohio, where the derailment occurred, have pressed the government to do more to answer questions about the mental and physical health effects of the disaster, from post-traumatic stress to cancer. The funding will come through the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences and could total up to $10 million over 5 years. It will support 1 to 3 projects that focus on tracking and understanding health issues in the community, CNN reported. The move follows pressure from residents and leaders, including Vice President J.D. Vance, who was an Ohio senator when the derailment occurred. NIH, quote, NIH is working to ensure that the people of East Palestine and the surrounding communities are listening to, cared for, and get the answers they deserve, said NIH Director Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. Quote, this multidisciplinary research program will focus on public health tracking and surveillance of the community's health conditions. In 2024, the NIH founded 6 short-term research projects totaling over $1 million. The new funding will take a more in-depth look at possible long-term impacts. Misty Allison, an East Palestine resident who sits on the board of one of the health studies, called the new funding a pleasant surprise. Quote, this next level of funding will enable us to conduct comprehensive and high-impact studies that can truly make a difference in this area, she said. More than 2 years after the derailment, residents have reported symptoms such as breathing problems, signs of post-traumatic stress, and even some cases of cancer. But experts say it can be hard to link cancer directly to the chemicals from the crash. This is fantastic. You know, I'm not a fan of... I'm not a fan, just like anyone, of adverse health reactions that people are having to things. And if $10 million sent to do some health research helps to get some answers to these people and at least some money to help pay their medical bills, I'm all for it. This is what government should be doing, is helping people out like this. So I'm all for it. And frankly, I think that a whole lot more needs to be done to this company that caused this chemical disaster in the first place. Way more than already has been done. In my opinion, they should have immediately paid for all these people's property and paid for them to move somewhere far, far away from East Palestine, because it's ridiculous. These people are still living there, and their property value is essentially none. They've lost all value in it because of this trade deal. No one's going to want to live there anymore, right? So I'm all for this. Great job, NIH. Keep doing things like this. All right. So, gotta take a sip of water here. Let's talk about Iran now. We got 3 stories to go over, so bear with me. Our first story is kind of an update. So if you don't already know, the United States launched a targeted attack on Iran to take out their nuclear sites across the country. Now, I was hesitant, to say the least, when I heard about this. This happened late at night, and I saw that this could potentially be the start of a major war between the United States, Iran, other surrounding areas, and I was not thrilled when I heard the United States was bombing Iran. All my life, we've had war and conflict happening in the Middle East involving the United States, and when I heard that more of it was happening, was not thrilled. That being said, after listening to several different people, one of them being Ben Shapiro, who we're going to talk about in just a minute, I've kind of come around to this, and I'm seeing the light a little bit more and what the president has tried to push, and that this was actually a good thing this was done. This has kept Iran from getting nukes. This has supplanted the fact that the United States is the international powerhouse when it comes to making sure that everyone else stays in line. My biggest fears with the conflict happening and why I was hesitant was I don't want to see more U.S. service members hurt, killed, or maimed because of attacks in the Middle East. We've had enough already, and I want to see some serious consideration before we start sending more U.S. service members in there. What seems to be happening, though, is largely air bombings and very targeted attacks that have not led to the loss of life of any U.S. citizens, which I'm all for that. Iran is a country that absolutely hates our guts, and frankly, they deserve what they had coming for them. And yeah, so that just kind of lays the basis. Like I said, I just don't want to see more service members hurt. That's why I was hesitant when I heard that these attacks happened in the first place. As I said, I've come around a little more. I still believe the international community needs to be doing more to defend against the Middle East. It's always on the United States' shoulders to go and protect the rest of the world from whatever the Middle East has been doing. Frankly, whatever the rest of the world has been doing, for that matter. And what Iran does is something that affects the whole world. So, frankly, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, European countries, all of our allies need to be stepping up a little bit more, at least flipping the bill, paying for these operations to go into place, or doing them themselves with U.S. help. Would love to see that happen. So this first story from Blaze Meat is a bit of an update to all that. So Iran fires missiles at U.S. bases and U.S. troops on bases in Qatar and Iraq. So this is Iran kind of coming back at us because they're pissed off now what we've done, even though we totally told them this was going to happen. If you listen to anything Trump has said, he said this was going to happen at some point. They didn't strike a peace deal with them. So CNN said the initial attack appeared to be largely symbolic. Iran began its retaliatory attack against the United States in a missile barrage against U.S. bases in Qatar and Iraq, according to CNN, Fox News, and other resources. The reports include first-hand claims of explosions at both bases at about 8 p.m. local time. They're going to find overwhelming American force from the American military. That is really what the choice before the Iranians. The report initially stated that 10 missiles attacked the facility in Qatar and 1 missile in Iraq. Further reporting from Fox News puts the numbers at 6. CNN anchor Becky Anderson called the mission, quote, highly symbolic rather than a substantiated strike. A CNN correspondent in Tehran, Iran, said the officials confirmed the attack on television. In another sign that the attack was intended to be limited and symbolic, Iran reportedly gave Qatar prior notice of the missile barrage, presumably to avoid casualties. A top Qatar official condemned the attack in a statement on social media and confirmed that no lives have been lost. U.S. officials warned Iran against retaliation on Sunday. Quote, if they make smart decisions, I think they're going to find us willing to work with them, said Vice President J.D. Vance. Quote, if they continue to support terrorism, nuclear weapon programs, then they're going to find overwhelming American force from the American president. That is really a choice before the Iranians, and that's a choice only they can make. U.S. Secretary Marco Rubio threatened Iran if the country tried to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, I think that's how you pronounce it, a key water channel for trade. At least there are about 40,000 American troops stationed across the Middle East. So, doesn't seem like any life was lost. I'm not a fan of war. So anytime bombings take place, anytime attacks happen, all of this, I'm concerned. I don't like war. I want peace. If this is the way that we achieve more peace is by more bombings, then I guess that's the way that things have to be. I wish it wasn't so. I'm happy to see that we're living in a time where we have more robotics and more computerized systems to help ensure that our service members' lives are not lost, that our service members are not injured for the rest of their lives. Like I said, that's always my main concern whenever I'm coming at these issues is just I don't want more of our U.S. citizens to get hurt because of it. And it doesn't seem like it's happened so far. And I'm trusting and I'm praying that President Trump knows what he's doing and has the best intelligence necessary to ensure that the least amount of U.S. casualties are affected. The least amount of U.S. lives are affected because of these attacks. So let's move on to what Ben Shapiro has to say. So Ben Shapiro, this article I think kind of summed up a lot of kind of how I felt about it a little more succinctly than I could necessarily say on the show, like in the moment. So I'm going to read through this. This is largely how I feel. I'll talk about it in a minute. And we have one more story after this about Iranian sleeper cells in the United States. So I listened to several other people other than Ben Shapiro. Me and Ben Shapiro have kind of a shaky relationship sometimes. I appreciate a lot of what he has to say. Sometimes I think he's a little bit overboard, but in terms of what's happening in Iran right now, I think he's totally spot on. And let me just read through this. So Ben Shapiro, President Trump, quote, a historically courageous man for preventing nuclear-armed Iran. President Donald Trump, quote, has more spine than any president in decades, according to Daily Wire editor emeritus Ben Shapiro. Shapiro praised the president on Sunday in a special episode of The Ben Shapiro Show covering the United States strike on Iran over the weekend that targeted 3 of Tehran's nuclear facilities, including the underground fortress-like facility at Fordo. Quote, now, let me be 100% clear. President Trump has more spine, more intestinal fortitude, more cojones than any president of my lifetime by far. It's not close. Said Shapiro. Quote, this is of course in a historically courageous man. If that was not clear from the moment he stood up during the last campaign, shaking his fist and yelling fight, fight, fight after being shot in the ear, President Trump is a man who has courage. To accomplish the strike, Trump overcame significant domestic opposition from both sides of the political aisle. He has also sparked a seismic shift in the power dynamics in the Middle East, whereas for Israel is now a regional power backed by the United States, and diplomatically, the Abraham Accords are much more likely to gain signatories, according to Shapiro. Quote, he said for decades, Iran would not have a nuclear weapon, and then he kept his word. And keeping your word is unbelievably rare. He added before reciting promises made by former President Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran. Trump's actions to destroy or at least severely set back Iran's nuclear ambitions has made the president a seminal figure in both American history and world history, according to Shapiro. In the United States, Trump, quote, faced down a lot of haters. His decision to drop bombs on Iran from critics in the Democrat Party, some of whom are now calling for the president's impeachment, to isolationists on the right, some of whom are also calling for Trump's impeachment. Critics on the right said the United States' close relationship with Israel and the Trump administration backing of Israeli action against Iran would pull the United States into a wider war, possibly launching a third world war. Quote, anyone who told you that was going to happen, a United States war with Iran, was lying to you because President Trump lives in the world. He lives in the world of reality, and he played this absolutely perfectly. It is not possible for a president to have played this better, said Shapiro. Trump allowed Israel to knock out Iran's anti-air defenses and the top echelon of its military while offering Tehran repeated chances to negotiate in good faith over the end of its nuclear program. When negotiations failed and the Israeli military pressure did not force Tehran into talks, Trump greenlit the strike on Iran nuclear facilities over significant domestic opposition. In the face of those who believe both left and right that American involvement in the world is somehow the prime evil, the great driver of world suffering, that the world is somehow better off in the hands of the Chinese and the Russians and Iran going nuclear, he stood up, Shapiro said. He stood up to the morons like AOC on the left who proclaimed that Trump himself is a Hitlerian threat to the world by standing up to a true Hitlerian threat to the world, said Shapiro. He stood up to the dolts on the right who thought they could somehow claim the moment Trump built the Make America Great Again movement for themselves, painting a Howard Zinn American hating turd with a coating of MAGA language and then trying to pass it off as filet mignon. He stood up to all of them and he proved that America is great again. Thank you, Mr. President, for restoring peace through strength. There has never been a president in my lifetime with Donald Trump's spine. So like I said, I feel a lot more confident this was the right move after hearing what other people who are a lot more knowledgeable about international affairs have to say about all of this. As I've said before, as I will continue to say, I'm not a fan of war. I don't want to see more service members harmed. Whatever way possible to ensure that happens, that more people are kept safe. I trust that the president of anyone in this country right now knows how to ensure that. And if this was what it took to ensure that Iran doesn't get nukes to hurt more people, then so be it, right? If that's what had to be done. As long as we are aware that this could backfire. This could absolutely backfire on all of us. There could be a war that springs up out of this. I'm not saying there's a war right now or a war anytime soon, but one could begin. And as long as we acknowledge that, hopefully that is on the president's mind, that could happen as a possibility, and he's doing everything in his power to keep people safe and to mitigate the fallout from all of this, so be it. Happy to be American. Regardless of what the president has done, I don't regret my vote at all. Not one bit. There have been a lot of people on the right who have said, oh, I regret my vote. I'm pulling back my vote. I'm not happy with Trump anymore because of all this. I've never said that. I've always been happy with my vote with the president. There's nothing that has changed that so far, and there's nothing I can see foreseeably in the future unless things majorly change that I would ever regret my vote for President Trump. So I think it's a bit harsh to say things like that. I'm giving the president the benefit of the doubt. He's doing all he can as a president. My expectations are not over the moon with the president. I've very low expectations for politicians as a whole. I trust that the president would do a better job than Kamala Harris. Do I think that the president would have done a better job than other people out there? I'm not sure about that. I'm not willing to take position on that yet. But he's done a great job so far. Happy that he's at the helm of the nuclear football right now. And I hope that peace continues in the future and that there isn't a major fallout from this. So I'll be sure to keep you updated on everything that happens with that going forward. But I absolutely agree with Ben Shapiro. Extremely brave move by the president. And as I said, if this keeps Iran from having nukes, fantastic. I just don't want to see more people hurt and injured from the U.S. because of it. So last thing we have to say is about sleeper cells in the United States. So Trump Border Czar warns of Biden-era gotaways amid sleeper cell concerns. Quote, the biggest national security vulnerability this country's ever seen comes from Biden-era gotaways, Trump Border Czar Tom Homan said on Sunday as he warned federal officials do not have a full accounting of all the people from Iran who illegally crossed the border during the last administration. Homan spoke about the situation after being asked by Fox News anchor Maria Bartano on Sunday morning features about the potential for Iranian sleeper cells after President Trump ordered strikes on Tehran's nuclear facilities this weekend. Citing data from U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Homan explained that there were about 1,200 nationals of Iran released in the United States by immigration officials under President Joe Biden, within a stark contrast to 0 releases under the Trump administration. 0. Fantastic. That's an absolute win for Trump. That is why I don't regret my vote for Trump. Things like that. That's an absolute win. Quote, right now, because of President Trump's leadership, we have the most secure border in my lifetime. Most secure border in the history of this nation. So we have a secure border. So that was President Trump's big win on securing this nation, Homan said. So we're not releasing people into this country. Special interest aliens aren't crossing that border undetected. But under Joe Biden, we had over 10 million people cross that border. But my biggest concern from day one, beyond the fentanyl, beyond the sex trafficking of women and children, were the 2 million known gotaways. He continued, over 2 million people cross that border. We don't know who they are, where they came from, because they got away. Because Border Patrol is so overwhelmed with the humanitarian crisis that Biden created that over 2 million people crossed the border and got away. That is my biggest concern. That's what created the biggest national security vulnerability this country's ever seen. Homan conceded that the Trump administration does not know where all the gotaways have gone, but he expressed confidence in the leaders at the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and the White House now compared to when Biden was president. Quote, no, the intelligence community under President Trump has been on this since day one. What gives me any confidence at all is that you don't have Christopher Wray there leading the FBI. You got Kash Patel there. You don't have Alejandro Mayorkas there leading DHS anymore. You got Kristi Noem. And you certainly don't have former Vice President Kamala Harris as the border czar, Homan said. So President Trump brought a great team, been on this since day one, Homan added. Do we know where every one of the 2 million are? No, we don't know where they are. We don't know why they're here or where they came from. But we do know Border Patrol intelligence over the last 4 years, they have found prayer mats south of the border. They have found identification for people from Iran, Turkey, Uzbekistan, Syria, south of the border. Homan concluded by saying, so, we know that some terrorists have crossed the border. We'd be a fool to think 0 crossed. The thing is, though, we've got President Trump as commander-in-chief who has put all resources on that. That's why President Trump, from day one of ICE operations, despite what the left media may say, he has been focused on national security threats and public safety threats. And between ICE and the Bureau, we have removed thousands of national security threats because of President Trump's leadership on this. So I think sleeper cells are a major threat, right? I'm sure that we are on this as a country, that because of the stance we've taken on Iran, that those could be activated on American citizens. So look out, America. We might have something coming for us. But I'm confident in the people in our government right now that they will do all they can to protect Americans from these threats. Every day that goes on after these attacks that we did on Iran against the Iranian nuclear facilities, I think is another day in the clear for us, and the less likely that we're going to have an attack from an Iranian sleeper cell. So, yeah, it's like I said, it's been quite an interesting week. So that's about all I have for our show for today. Thank you so much for joining us for it. I hope that my positions are clear on a lot of these issues that we have before us. I'm a lot more confident in the position the United States has taken since their bombing, after hearing what other people have to say, especially people like Ben Shapiro. I trust his opinion a lot when it comes to these things. He's highly studied in all of these international relations matters. So that's not to say I can't form my own opinions. I form my own opinions live on this air constantly in front of you all. But foreign policy is not my strong suit when it comes down to it. So, as I said before, as long as a major war is not started, as long as we are not sending thousands of U.S. military troops to go fight against Iran on the ground with them getting blown up and shot, as long as that's not happening, I'm all for it. This is great. So that was my fear when I heard about this a couple nights ago, was what was going to be. So with that, I hope that you had a great time watching this episode. I know I sure did. Please join us back here on Wednesday. We have so much more to talk about, so many more updates on all of this coming for you. But with that, make sure you're following me on the platforms. Our shows come out Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. With that, I have been Nathan Hale. This has been Spin Cycle Live. Peace out. Bye.